In verse 31, moreover, you shall take no ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death. No, he shall be surely be put to death. Now, what does this mean? You shall not take a ransom. A, a ransom here means you should call a redemption price. A redemption price. What is a redemption price? It means that the kinsman who is to avenge the death of the one who died cannot say, well, if you give me 40 cows, I will spare your life. That is what it means by a ransom for the life of a murderer. Nothing shall be used to redeem his life because he is guilty of death. He must be put to death. So the law of God is justice. When a person intentionally kills another, then it is a life for a life, and there is no refuge and no ransom. No one to take his place. No one can pay the price to take the place. No one can use animal or whatever to take the place. The person who is guilty must die. That is what it means by the law of God. The law of God cannot be modified. It cannot be changed because the principle of the law of God is justice. Because you have taken a life, you have taken the blood of another intentionally. And hence, he, if judged correctly and justly, he must die. That is what it means that no ransom for the life. All right. Now, if there is a person who have fled to the city of refuge, you shall take no ransom as well, that he may dwell in the land before the death of the priest. Meaning, if there was an accidental death and this person runs to the city of refuge, he cannot say, hey, I don't want to wait until the death of the priest, of the high priest, too long. Can I give you 10 shekels of gold? And the answer is no. And so the principle here is this: you shall not pollute the land where you are, for the blood defiles the land, and no atonement can be made for the land for the blood that is shed on it, except by the blood of him who shed it. Let's break this down. You see, God says in verse 33, you shall not pollute the land or cause the land to be defiled, to be godless. Now, this is a very interesting word. The word pollute here is to cause the land to be godless. What does that mean? It means that when God has given his law of justice, it needs to be executed. But if the law of justice given by God is not executed, then God says that is a pollution. You have defiled the land and you have made the land as if there was no God. You disregarded the law of justice. That is what it means. For blood defiles the land. What do you mean blood defiles the land? It means that when somebody is killed, then somebody has taken the life of another and has dripped the blood of another. And blood symbolizes blood. Uh, and you find that when that is done, when somebody has killed another and blood has been spilled, then in verse 33 says that there is no covering. Atonement here is covering. No atonement to be made for the land, for the blood that is shed on it, can only be covered by the blood of him who shed it. Now, this is a principle. Just look at this. This is a principle. A person who is killed is said to have his blood shed. And the blood that is shed can only be neutralized. And so the covering here is about an idea of neutralizing. Neutralizing by atonement. And atonement means covering. And so if we have an innocent die, then to neutralize it will be the blood of the murderer. And then it will be okay in God's mind. If you let this go, then it is pollution. It is defiling. You're treating the land as if there is no God. You are ignoring the law of God. It is that serious, really. It's that serious. And so to neutralize the shedding of blood of the innocent, you need to shed the blood of the one who killed him. And thereby this makes it justice. You cannot say, well, you can pay 40 shekels of gold, or you can say, I'll take 2 oxen. Nothing shall replace the man, because in God's eyes, it is a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life. Except for that instance where the murderer or the one who killed or shed blood of another person has done it unintentionally. And by that, he can run to the city of refuge to be incarcerated or waited out until the death of the of the high priest. That's the only 2 instances. So what do we learn about God today? You learn that God is fair. God looks at the state of mind of the person who has committed the crime or has sinned. And if the state of mind of the person was unintentional, there was no intent, no enmity, not waiting, there was no cause for him to do that, and it was unknowing, and it was unwitting, it was unintentional, it was accidental, then that person doesn't have to die. In God's mind, that person was not a murderer intentionally killing. Yes, he has taken a life and he cannot live freely. He then has to be sent to the city of refuge to stay there in what we today call incarceration. He is not permitted to go away from the city limits, because if he does, he can be killed by the kinsman. And so he stays there until the death of the high priest, and then he can go home free. But the state of the person who lies in wait, who has enmity, who hates the other person, takes up a weapon, kills the other person, yes, he has shed blood and he is called a murderer. A one who is killing, one who is murdered another intentionally. And so the 10 commandments that we read says, thou shalt not murder, has a penalty, and the penalty is a life for a life. And so here in verses 33 to 34, we read that God expects the atonement would be the blood of the one who shed the blood. That it's all. It's a life for a life, and it cannot be a representative life. You cannot have the son of this person taking the place. You cannot have his servant dying for him. In God's law of justice, as he has described in chapter 35, the one who sheds blood must be the one who dies for it, because that would be justice. Therefore, do not cause the land to be godless, which you live in there, in the midst which I dwell. God is dwelling there. For I, the Lord, dwells among the children of Israel. The word amongst here is in the midst. God is staying there. Respect the presence of God. Do not cause anyone to think that the land is godless. I think you could say this, godless. If it is godless, then it is lawless. Why is it equated to lawlessness? Because God gave the law. And if the law is not obeyed, then you're treating the law as nothing and you're treating God as nothing. And you are lawless because you would then do whatever you want. And so God says here, you are staying the land. It's my land. I've given it to you. I've given you the law of justice. Do not treat this land as there is no God and therefore no law. And hence, remember that I am in your midst. I am in the midst of the sons of Israel. And obey God by the rules of justice.